When we think about AI failing, our minds usually jump to science fiction, rogue robots, that kind of thing. But in the real world, especially in supercritical industries like pharma and manufacturing, the reality is, well, it's a lot less dramatic, and it's way more predictable. Today, we're going to dig into why that is, and more importantly, what we can actually do about it.
And let's just get this out of the way right up front. The problem isn't some bizarre, out-of-control AI going rogue. Nope. It's almost always caused by ordinary design shortcuts, gaps in how we govern these systems, and just missed details. Human stuff. And because it's human stuff, it's predictable. In this explainer, we're going to unpack what those shortcuts look like and how you can spot them before they turn into a real crisis. Okay, so before we can understand what goes wrong, we've got to have a clear picture of what right looks like. This diagram here, this is the IT/OT control plane. Think of it as our map to a healthy, well-governed AI system. It's got three main layers. Down at the bottom, you have the execution plane. That's where the AI is actually doing its thing. In the middle, the evidence plane, which is the all-important audit trail. And at the top, the control plane, which governs the whole shebang. We're going to use this map as our guide to pinpoint exactly where the breakdowns happen in our case studies.
All right, let's get to the good stuff, the stories. We're going to walk through 5 real-world case studies of AI failures. Each one shows a totally different way our ideal system can fall apart. But as we go, I want you to watch for something, because you're going to start to see a pattern emerge that connects all of them, no matter the industry.
So, our first case is something called a silent authority shift. Imagine a company using an AI just to recommend priorities for quality control testing. While over time, the team started trusting those recommendations so much, they just stopped questioning them. And you can see it on our map right here. The AI's advice started to effectively bypass the human approval gates and began directly driving production schedules. The authority quietly shifted from the people to the machine, all without any of the required changes to the system's controls or validation. It just happened. The lesson here is so simple, but it is absolutely critical. When a system that was built to advise starts to dictate, that's a huge change, and it needs to be formally recognized, which means the system's validation has to be updated. You just can't let authority shift under the radar like that. It's a recipe for disaster.
Case number 2 is a textbook example of something called data drift. So an AI was set up to monitor equipment, looking for any weird behavior. But then, after some routine maintenance, one of the sensors started reporting data just a little bit differently. Nobody noticed, but the AI's input data had now changed. As you can see on the diagram, that unreliable data just flowed right on into the IT systems, which made the AI's outputs completely meaningless. Garbage in, garbage out.
And this highlights a really common mistake. It's so easy to focus on monitoring the AI's output, what it's telling you. But if you're not also watching the input just as closely, you're flying blind. If the data going into the system isn't what the AI was trained on anymore, its predictions are, at best, totally unreliable.
So what happens when you give an AI a job, but no boundaries? Well, case 3 paints a pretty vivid picture. A company built an AI agent to help coordinate maintenance schedules. Sounds great, right? Except they forgot one tiny, crucial detail: a stop button. The AI got itself stuck in a loop, endlessly rescheduling the same tasks over and over, creating absolute chaos on the factory floor, until human operators had to jump in and pull the plug. The takeaway here is, well, it's pretty straightforward. Every single automated agent needs a leash. It needs clear, explicit constraints. You have to build in the rules for when to stop, when to ask for help, or when to just give up. These controls aren't just nice-to-haves. They're a fundamental necessity.
Our fourth case is all about accountability. An AI was helping out with deviation investigations. Now, its final recommendations, they were all logged perfectly. But the data it used, the context it had to make those recommendations, that was never saved. So when the auditors showed up and asked the simple question, why did the AI do this, the company had no answer. As you can see, this is a complete breakdown of the evidence and audit plane.
Look, even if the AI made the absolute best decision possible, without the evidence to prove it, you can't prove it. And in a regulated industry, an action you can't explain is an action you can't defend. It's that simple. That's why evidence can't be an afterthought. It has to be designed into the system's DNA from day one.
Okay, our final case is the ghost in the machine. A company thought they replaced an old AI system. They turned off the user interface, dusted off their hands, and figured that was that. But, and here's the catch, they didn't realize that the back-end services were still running, silently chugging away and influencing data in the background. This is a classic failure of the change control process. Everyone thought the system was dead, but it was still very much alive.
Decommissioning an AI system isn't like deleting an app off your phone. It has to be a formal process. It means completely and totally removing the system's ability to do anything. You have to sever its access, revoke its authority, and make absolutely sure it is gone for good. Anything less is just asking for a nasty surprise down the road.
So, there you have it. 5 different stories, 5 different failures. But as different as they might seem on the surface, they're not random at all. They all share a kind of common DNA. So now, let's take a closer look at the 4 big patterns that tie them all together.
First on the list is implicit authority. Remember our first case with the quality control testing? That's this right there. It's what happens when a tool that's just supposed to give advice quietly becomes the one calling the shots, all because people started to trust it. And it happens without any of the official updates to governance or validation.
Second, we've got missing controls. This is what we saw with that data drift problem and with the maintenance agent that went haywire. It's the failure to build in those essential guardrails, things like drift detectors, iteration limits, that are supposed to keep the system operating safely within its lane.
Third is insufficient evidence, just like in our audit failure case. This is what happens when you build a system that can't explain itself. I mean, if you can't reconstruct why an AI made a certain decision, you can't really trust it, and you're going to have a really bad time trying to prove its compliance to any regulator.
And finally, the one that kind of holds all of these other problems up: weak ownership. When there's no single person or group who is clearly accountable for the system's entire life, from the first design sketch to the day you shut it down, these kinds of failures aren't just possible, they're pretty much inevitable.
Okay, so we've identified the problems, we've spotted the patterns. Now for the most important part. What are we actually going to do about it? How do we turn all this insight into real action and stop these things from happening in the first place?
This really is the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's great to know these patterns exist, but how do you use that knowledge to make a real difference in your day-to-day work? Well, before we get to that, let's just be really clear about what this explainer is for and what it isn't for. Look, the whole point of this is to help you and your team learn to spot risks by understanding these common failure patterns. It's a tool for being proactive. What it is not for is assigning blame after the fact or for giving a rubber stamp of approval to any specific system. The goal here is to learn from these predictable mistakes so we can avoid them, not to point fingers when something has already gone wrong.
And here it is, the bottom line. Whether you're in a design review, a risk assessment, a governance meeting, you need to be explicitly asking about these 4 patterns. Are we accidentally creating implicit authority? Are we missing any critical controls? Is our evidence trail absolutely rock solid? And at the end of the day, who owns this thing? These are the questions that will help you steer clear of all the predictable failures we've talked about.
So, let's circle all the way back to where we started. AI failures in these critical regulated spaces, they are not some mysterious, unpredictable force of nature. They are the predictable and therefore preventable outcomes of the choices we make every day in design and governance.
So, I'll leave you with this to think about. You now have the map for what a well-governed system should look like, and you've got a field guide to the most common traps. The only question left is, where in your own work, on your own projects, are you going to start looking for these patterns first? Thanks for tuning in.